Oh, the schoolboy always, which for me was always, it helped me. I could hop on stage and it gives me a bit of confidence.
Angus Young isn't much taller than his own guitar. He doesn't give tearful backstage speeches, never tries to become a symbol, and has barely changed in more than 50 years. Still wearing the schoolboy uniform, still wielding the deep red Gibson SG, still doing that immortal duck walk, thrashing across the stage like a kid skipping class just to raise hell. But behind the image of that eternal schoolboy is someone who has never truly been okay. Angus Young is afraid of the stage. His hands tremble every time he steps into the spotlight. He watched his brother lose his memory and die. He kept playing while a close friend dropped dead. He's been linked unjustly to horrific murder cases. And while the world often sees him as just a wild guitar player, Angus quietly became the most steadfast pillar of AC/DC, someone who never left, even when everyone else did at some point. This piece doesn't glorify the things everyone already knows, like Back in Black or Highway to Hell. It tells the story of the everyday fragments, the unexpected, even the strange moments that make up the real Angus Young. Quiet, stubborn, deeply emotional, and loyal to the point of sheer obstinacy. In 1980, when AC/DC stormed into the studio to write and record Back in Black, Angus Young was only 25 years old. His brother Malcolm was 27. Phil Rudd was 26. Bassist Cliff Williams was 30. And Brian Johnson, the man who had just replaced Bon Scott after his sudden death, was the oldest at 32. At an age when most musicians were still fumbling around in bar bands, Angus Young was shouldering the weight of a crumbling giant. Bon Scott, the friend, the brother, the sole voice of AC/DC, had just died after a night of heavy drinking in a parked car. The band had no time to grieve. They had only two choices: fall apart or stand up and create something powerful enough to survive the tragedy. They chose the latter. Right as a real storm was rolling in, it was hurricane season in the Bahamas, where they had decided to record at Compass Point Studios. Wind howled through the studio. Windows rattled. The ceiling leaked. But the riffs just kept pouring out. We had pretty much nothing on the first day. Then a few days later, the whole album was there, Angus recalled. Back in Black was completed in just 7 weeks. When released, it wasn't just a tribute to Bon Scott. It was a declaration of survival. A surge of grief turned into electricity, a funeral without tears but bursting with voltage. And the most unbelievable part? The man behind those immortal riffs, the one who buried all that pain into every note, was only 25 years old. When Back in Black was born, Angus Young became an icon, not through virtuosic technique or rousing speeches to crowd, but through an image that seemed almost absurd. A grown man in a school uniform, headbanging like he was possessed on an electrified stage. Few people know that the outfit wasn't the result of any image consultant or marketing team. It was the idea of his sister, Margaret Young. In AC/DC's early days, Angus experimented with all sorts of wild stage costumes. A superhero, a nurse, even a gorilla. None of them lasted more than a night, until Margaret said, "You always look like a kid playing hooky. Why not just wear a school uniform on stage?" Angus tried it on, and he's never taken it off since. What started as a family joke became his battle armor. Inside was a man whose hands trembled before every show, who suffered from stage fright so severe he had to trick himself by becoming someone else. When I put that outfit on, I'm no longer Angus. I'm a character. And that character is crazy enough to be on stage. For nearly 50 years, Angus hasn't changed his outfit. He doesn't follow trends. He doesn't refresh his image. He doesn't need giant stages, smoke machines, or choreographed performances. Just that uniform, the cherry red SG, legs kicked high with voltage, and a riff powerful enough to bring a whole venue down. Because to Angus Young, repetition isn't boring. It's loyalty to himself, to his band, and to the raw rock and roll he chose to ride with until the very end. In a world where artists change guitars like outfits, one style per tour, a new look for every video, Angus Young has only ever had one: the Gibson SG. No fresh paint, no special effects, no limited edition. Just a slim cherry red body that seems fused to him every time he steps on stage. "I don't need 20 guitars," Angus once said. I just need the one that understands my voice. That SG isn't just an instrument. It's a loyal interpreter between his hands and the world. When Angus trembles before a show, that guitar grounds him. When words fail to express what he feels, it sings for him. When Malcolm left the band, when Bon Scott died, when millions of fans screamed below and all he felt was loneliness under the lights, that guitar was still there. And unlike many other guitarists, Angus never tried to play faster, shred harder, or show off with fancy tricks. He doesn't solo to impress. He solos to steady himself, to lock his inner scream into something tangible, something he can control. To Angus, the Gibson SG is like a wild animal's claw, unflashy, unchanging, but sharp enough to slash through time, familiar enough to carry him through every storm, and honest enough to never need an explanation. No one would expect that a man who runs like a whirlwind on stage, headbanging like mad for 2 straight hours, is someone who trembles every time he performs. But that's exactly who Angus Young is. From the very first time he stepped on stage with AC/DC, Angus knew he wasn't built for the spotlight. He doesn't like speaking in front of crowds. He's not comfortable dealing with the media. He even once admitted, "I'm not good at balancing the outside world and my own world." And so before every show, he falls into a familiar state. Breathless anxiety, cold hands, a stomach twisted in knots like he's about to make an irreparable mistake. Those around him see a perfectly timed, blazing Angus Young. But inside, he's battling just to stay upright before the show begins. And he found a way through by becoming someone else. Each time he puts on the schoolboy uniform, Angus transforms. He's no longer the man afraid of the stage. He becomes a character he created, a misfit school kid, rebellious, wild, reckless, fearless. It's that character, not Angus, who roars on stage, darting back and forth with a cherry red SG, playing each riff as if shouting straight into the face of fear. Angus doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't rely on sedatives to deal with panic. He has one ritual: put on the outfit, tune the guitar, lower his head, and step out. Most of the time, I'm so scared I want to run away. But I've learned how to keep it inside and turn it into energy. When the first drum hits, I'm no longer myself. The fear never goes away. But instead of running from it, Angus lives with it, performs with it, and most importantly, never lets it win. That's what makes Angus Young different. He doesn't stand on stage to be worshipped. He stands there because it's the only place where fear becomes music. And maybe, just maybe, those manic headbangs that everyone thinks are part of the act are really just Angus holding himself together. Angus Young has never liked explaining himself, especially to those who approach music just to find something to criticize, and even less to those who accuse AC/DC of planting satanic, demonic, or violent messages into the minds of young people. In the late 1970s, when Highway to Hell was released, AC/DC suddenly became a target of the satanic panic, a movement that condemned rock music as the devil's tool. They were accused of spreading evil messages, and rumors even circulated that if you played their records backwards, you'd hear hidden satanic messages in the songs. Angus's response? A dry laugh. Play it backwards to hear a message? He said in one of his rare public remarks, "Why bother? It's written right on the cover. Highway to Hell. If I made it any clearer, I'd have to draw you a map." That's classic Angus Young, blunt, cool, sarcastic, and never trying to please anyone. To him, rock and roll isn't a moral discourse. It's raw life force, a natural rebellion that everyone has a right to tap into. No permission needed. And just like how he wears the same uniform, plays the same guitar, and shakes the same head, he's also been writing the same lyrics for decades about booze, women, darkness, and rebellion. No embellishment. No excuses, no dodging. Not because he's glorifying anything bad, but because he believes music is the one place where people can be honest about their darker sides without having to apologize for it. Angus Young has never been good at talking about emotions. But if there's one thing that made him fall into an unusually long silence, it was the death of his brother, Malcolm Young. Malcolm wasn't just a co-founder of AC/DC. He shaped the entire sound, rhythm, and spirit of the band. While Angus was a lightning bolt on stage, Malcolm was the solid ground beneath it. A man who never played a riff out of time. A man who always knew when to say enough. And most importantly, a man Angus could trust completely. Ever since they played music together in their Sydney living room, they didn't need many words. They spoke to each other through guitars. In 2014, Malcolm was diagnosed with severe dementia. He forgot the chords he had written, the songs that had taken AC/DC to the top. Angus knew it was irreversible, but he still took Malcolm out of the studio, out into the yard, sat him down, and played guitar for him. Some days Malcolm didn't respond. Some days he just nodded. Barely 3 years later, Malcolm Young passed away. As usual, Angus didn't give a long speech. He simply said, "Mal was the foundation of AC/DC. Without Mal, I wouldn't have done anything." But that loss poured into every note of Power Up, the album released in 2020 after years of AC/DC being inactive. Angus called it an album for Malcolm, just like Back in Black had once been a farewell to Bon Scott. And throughout the entire recording process, Angus kept an empty guitar set aside in the studio, a place for Malcolm. No one touched it. No one sat there anymore. To Angus, Malcolm wasn't just a brother. He was the only person in the world who could keep him in time, on stage and in life. After all the times he bled for his music, Angus Young chose a quiet place to live. Not Los Angeles, not London, not a multi-million-dollar beachfront mansion or a lavish rock star estate, but a modest house in the Netherlands, where he and his wife Ellen have quietly lived together for over 4 decades. They have no children, and they've never explained why. Angus never shows up at entertainment events. No film festivals, no fashion shows, no colleague weddings or medal ceremonies. He disappears almost completely from the outside world whenever he's not on tour, as if part of him never truly belonged to the public, just passing through to perform, then stepping back. He has no social media accounts, rarely gives interviews unless absolutely necessary, doesn't use a smartphone, doesn't take selfies, doesn't post weekly updates about the band like so many modern artists. All he needs is a quiet place to set his guitar down, a woman by his side who knows he's okay, a small garden, a hot cup of tea, and no one asking too many questions. Someone once asked him, "Are you happy without having children?" Angus simply shrugged. "I've got the band. I've got music. I've got Malcolm. I've got Ellen. I don't think I'm missing anything." To Angus Young, quiet is a retreat. It's a reward after a lifetime of turning fear into fire. Lifetime of screaming for rock and roll. In 2023, a real estate company in Sydney demolished an old worn-down house in Burwood, a regular residential area with no signs, no special fences. To them, it was just a $5.8 million Australian dollars property that needed to be cleared for redevelopment. They didn't know or hadn't been told that this was a childhood home of the young brothers George, Malcolm, and Angus, the place where AC/DC began, where the first riffs rang out from the living room, where a legend was conceived with flickering amps and the dreams of immigrant Scottish boys. That house had once been heritage listed. It once had a commemorative plaque. It was once a pilgrimage site for fans from around the world who came to stand in front of it and imagine this is where Australian rock and roll was born. But due to a chain of administrative errors, the historical value of the property was never passed on to the new owners. And so, one summer morning, it was crushed by bulldozers. When the news broke, all of Australia was stunned. Thousands of AC/DC fans raised their voices in protest. Journalists, historians, and artists alike expressed outrage and sorrow. Angus Young made no comment. He remained silent, as always. Perhaps to him, that house had long belonged to the past. But to everyone who grew up with the sound of his guitar, it was an invisible milestone in their memory. And its destruction, however unintentional, felt like a piece of rock and roll soul had been unearthed and shattered in the middle of an indifferent city. Legacy sometimes doesn't vanish in a loud explosion. It disappears in silence. And the only one who truly hears it may be Angus Young. The career journey of Angus Young. In 1973, when Malcolm Young asked his younger brother Angus, then just 18, to form a band named after the abbreviation for alternating. Current, AC/DC. Neither of them imagined they were launching one of the longest, wildest, and most uncompromising journeys in rock history. Angus entered music instinctively, with no formal training, no plan. The only things he brought with him were a Gibson SG, A schoolboy uniform, a body wired like a high-voltage line, and energy even he couldn't explain. While other artists of the time were trying to find their style, Angus chose nothing. He simply stayed true to his nature, and that nature became iconic. AC/DC started out as a true bar band, playing in the middle of beers, shouting, and flying bottles. It was in that chaos that Angus forged his legendary stage style. The frantic duck walk, constant headbanging, knees bouncing to each riff like a controlled seizure sound. When AC/DC released High Voltage 1975 and Let There Be Rock 1977, Angus stood out as a live-wire presence on stage. But behind the madness was a highly organized mind. He and Malcolm controlled every riff structure, every rhythm, every song progression. Angus wasn't just a performing face. He was the musical backbone. When Bon Scott died in 1980, everything seemed on the verge of collapse. But in that very moment, Angus stepped beyond the role of the energetic younger brother and became the band's main creative force. With Malcolm, he co-wrote Back in Black, not just a farewell to Bon, but a musical peak never quite replicated. The opening riff of Back in Black is a living legacy. It echoes in stadiums, festivals, weddings, funerals, battles, and films. And the man who wrote it was just 25. From the 1980s to the 2000s, as musical trends shifted endlessly, Angus Young kept wearing the same uniform, playing the same guitar, delivering riffs that seemed old, yet always gave the new generation goosebumps. AC/DC released those about Iraq, Razor's Edge, Ball Breaker, Stiff Upper Lip, and even in 2020, Power Up, an album dedicated to Malcolm, the eldest brother lost to dementia. Throughout the journey, AC/DC went through lineup changes, scandals, critical dismissals, and massive comebacks. But Angus never changed. Not to stay relevant, not to cater to the audience, not to hide from aging. Angus Young is living proof that you don't need to become someone else to survive. You just need to be yourself long enough. Angus Young never tried to become a legend. He simply did one thing, kept playing the same way, wearing the same outfit, channeling the same inner scream for half a century. As the world changed, as technology changed, as even his own band changed, Angus held on to that original rhythm. He never sped up, never drifted away, never lost it. He never spoke about loneliness. But you could see it in the way he bowed his head before the amplifier at every show. He never cried on stage, but you could hear that pain in the pounding opening riff of Thunderstruck. He never made grand statements, never sought shiny awards, never told his life story on talk shows. But he stood there through every time AC/DC nearly fell apart, through the funerals of friends, through every moment the world thought it couldn't go on. And then he stepped back out, wearing the same old uniform, strapping on the same familiar SG. No words needed, just one note. To rock and roll, Angus Young isn't a torchbearer. He's a current that never goes.